Hey everyone, welcome to the video version of the Reviving Vet Med podcast. Today's conversation is with someone who embodies what it means to be thoughtful, grounded, and human in our profession. Dr. Melodie Chan is a veterinarian who's less concerned with titles and more curious about the people behind them. She's a quiet adventurer, most at ease in the mountains, a fierce introvert who values deep, meaningful conversations over small talk, and a lifelong learner who brings a calm, reflective presence to everything she does, whether it's leadership roles or baking sourdough. Melodie has held space for others as a team leader and served in various veterinary organizations, but what stays with her the most are the human moments behind the work. She's drawn to the stories that live behind the medicine, the values, the struggles, the turning points that shape us as veterinary professionals. In today's episode, we talk about identity in veterinary medicine, how it evolves, how it can be tested, and how to protect the parts of ourselves that make us feel most like us. Today's topics include the impact of early influences, navigating values conflicts, creating space for life beyond work, and how vet schools might better prepare students for a sustainable, flexible professional identity. So, with that said, I'm really excited to share this interview with you. Let's go ahead and get into the episode. All right. Hi, Melodie. It's so great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for inviting me on.
I am going to jump right into it. And the first question I'm going to ask you is looking back on your journey in vet medicine, how has your sense of who you are as a veterinarian changed from when you first started?
I really love that question because I see it all the time in vet students, new grads, and then our evolution. And why I love that question is I really saw being a veterinarian initially as the title and really defining who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it actually was a big part of my identity of, who are you? I'm a veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at now the evolution of it, I look at it more as it's just a part of who I am,
Mm-hmm.
and it's no longer the title or the destination. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I see that a lot of that struggle in the first 5 years, especially of students coming out of vet school,
Mm-hmm.
where the getting into vet school and becoming a veterinarian is so much the identity and the goal. And then we forget, oh, wow, there's a whole life after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reflecting on this and thinking about the title of veterinarian. It's instead of it being a destination, it's actually a doorway. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a gateway to
Mm-hmm.
other things that you can do with that specific training that you've had
Mm-hmm.
up to that point.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I love that. I've truly never thought about that before. I love this idea of, okay, you have arrived at this point, and now all of these, doors or other doors have opened up for you now that you have achieved your veterinarian status, your DVM or your VMD or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. It's so interesting because, I think part of this gets so ingrained in us because as children, so many of
Yeah.
us decided as children, I want to be a vet. And I don't know about you. I mean, my situation is also unique in the fact that both of my parents are vets and they always wanted me to be a vet. And so whenever anybody would ask me when I was growing up, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wouldn't even have time to answer. And my parents would say, well, a veterinarian, of course. And
Okay.
so you get so defined by this, and it's so hard to get into vet school, and it's tough to get through vet school. And so, like you said, by the end of that 25, 30-year journey, it's like all consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it's tough as a young person deciding what do you want to do or what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Like those are questions you get consistently.
Mhm.
And I think about, unless you pick one of the professions,
Mhm.
dentist, lawyer, doctor, veterinarian, even engineer, like those are those tangible titles and
Mhm.
professions that you can
Mhm.
say, or teacher, any of those titles sort of work. But what if, but you only know what you know at that point.
Mhm.
And so it's really tough because then you identify, you're just like, okay, well, this is what I'm striving for.
Mhm.
And is this what I really want to do?
Mhm. Yeah, you do only know what you know. That's so funny because, my daughter just graduated from preschool and they asked her, they did this video where they asked all the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said a swim teacher and a nurse. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense because those are professions that she has been exposed to because we've gone to the nurse to get needles and we've gone to
Yeah,
the swim teacher for swimming lessons.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it'll be interesting. We'll talk about it in our conversation, but how pigeonholed veterinarians can get into what their job is when they have only really been exposed to one thing rather than seeing it as you shared, as a doorway to other
Hmm.
opportunities. Um,
Absolutely. Because I think about like with your situation, that's
yeah.
interesting that your parents were almost so prescriptive of like, well, obviously she's
Mhm,
going to be a veterinarian.
mhm.
Whereas my parents, I used to joke, I think I had the only set of Asian parents that said, whatever you do, don't be a human doctor or a lawyer.
Be a human doctor or lawyer. Yeah, it kind of goes against the opposite of the stereotypes
The
most of us have,
stereotype.
right?
And so, and again, even for me, right? Like, what did I know about being a veterinarian was the practicing veterinarian and the small animal veterinarian. And it wasn't until through complete happenstance and
Mhm,
situational exposure
mhm.
that I was exposed to a dairy practice, large animal medicine, as a city kid growing up in Vancouver,
Yeah.
as and again, daughter of immigrant parents,
Yeah.
and as the Asian culture is, you just do not get dirty, nor do you do anything where you're going to get injured. you know Becoming a dairy veterinarian was absolutely not in the cards,
Not the norm. Yeah.
but it was what I was exposed to as I was applying for vet school.
Right.
And it was, again, what, like, I didn't even know that whole area was an option.
Mm-hmm.
And just having, again, luck, coincidence,
Mm-hmm.
determination, and grit, and figuring out that really worked with my personality.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I just fell into that side.
Oh, so fascinating. I wonder if you can tell me about a time when your identity as a veterinarian was really put to the test. Like if there was maybe a challenging case or some sort of career transition. I think some of us can identify with that. And
Mm-hmm.
how did you work through that?
There's two specific instances that really come to mind of just having my identity as a vet challenge. So the first one would be the transition from practicing on farm as a clinical veterinarian
Mm-hmm.
to then deciding to go full time into industry, with an animal health company, and
Mm-hmm.
becoming a technical services veterinarian and
Mm-hmm.
going into corporate. And so this would have been in around 2008, 2009,
Mm-hmm.
again. And that idea of being an industry veterinarian within our peers,
Mm-hmm.
of veterinary peers, it was interesting how my identity's challenged, because you get the offhand comments of, oh, you're going to the dark side, oh, you're not a real veterinarian anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And those, while they're said in jest, I always feel like whenever jokes are said, there's some element of truth
Mm-hmm.
behind there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think for me, like, having that challenge from peers definitely was difficult, but you push through that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I approach it as, I'll do the best that I can in this new role, and slowly build my street cred on what I could offer, to my peers, and also to, at the time, again, servicing producers and farmers, what I could bring to the table there.
Mm-hmm.
So that for me was one identity crisis, if you will, as a
Mm-hmm.
veterinarian. And then the second one was more recent, in changing then within that industry role as a subject matter expert, technical services veterinarian, to then moving into the commercial and sales side
Mm-hmm.
as a regional sales manager, leading a team of sales people.
Mm-hmm.
So, nothing to do with our veterinary degree per
Mm-hmm.
se,
Mm-hmm.
but everything to do with the experiences I had gathered to that point, in realizing, what the veterinary profession for me provided was an opportunity to work with many different people,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was in the form of client, vet client relationships, as a team lead within a clinic, as a team member within a clinic, and realizing for me, my biggest passion is people, is
Mm,
actually coaching, leading,
mhm,
supporting, inspiring people,
mhm,
and realizing, I could use some of the veterinary training, but that specific medicine training
mhm,
actually wasn't the end goal, or what filled my cup at the
mhm.
end of the day.
It's so interesting. Like what I hear you saying is that you identified this, value that you have around relationships and people and, supporting others, whether it's mentoring or leading a team or whatever it might be, and how you were able to tap into that versus just this label of veterinarian. And I think that's such a common experience. I had the same experience, even leaving academia and going into, consulting and locum work
Mm-hmm.
and so on. Um, I felt in that circumstance a personal identity crisis because I had always just thought I would be a professor and this is what I was going to do and couldn't imagine. I was like, well, if I can't work at another vet school, like where will I work?
Yeah.
And so that was something that I had to grapple with and see that there was more opportunities out there. And then in more recent years, moving from primarily being in clinical practice to doing wellness and mental health advocacy, so many people say to me, "So are you still a vet?"
Yeah.
And I'll be like, "Well, but yeah, like what do you mean? Well, do you still practice?" Where to them, it's like, well, the only way you're a veterinarian is if you
Yeah.
practice. And I think so many of us who are in non-clinical roles have those same conversations. And it can be challenging if you really haven't sat with your decision and recognized all the reasons that you've decided to do it. And yes, we've all had to let go of something
Mm-hmm.
to get to where we are. Even people who are in clinical practice have had to let go of some other opportunity, to be there. And so, we've had to sit and grapple with that. But it's very interesting, the public reaction
Yeah.
to those changes.
And that's why, for me, I think in reflecting and prepping for our conversation,
Mhm.
really thinking about that imagery of the veterinary degree
Mm,
just being a doorway
mhm.
for us, right? And it just opens us up to this huge, expansive mansion with so many rooms, and some of them connect and some of them don't, and some of them are open floor plan. But,
Yeah.
like there's so many different things you can
Yeah.
do with this.
Hmm.
And that training is that's just the beginning. That's just the
Hmm.
baseline
Totally.
for what you can apply otherwise.
Totally. Totally. Um, you've talked about how family and early influences shaped your path. You shared that your parents were very open and, you can do whatever.
Yeah.
How do you think those early experiences shaped your relationship with the profession and with yourself?
That's that's a fun and funny one because, again, I think I was very fortunate to have parents that, in a way, they were like, whatever you're going to do it well, but we're not going to dictate what you do. So
Mhm.
I had free reign to do what I wanted to do. My parents had never actually stepped foot on a dairy farm until 7 years into I when I'd been practicing. So they
Oh.
really had no clue what I was doing. Um, and so, I think for me, it was a bit of that independent streak, if you will, of it I could do what I wanted to do. And so in that early 2000s, when I graduated, again, from the outward physical appearance being a small Asian female on
Mhm.
a dairy farm, I think for me, it really just shaped that I was accepted, in the
Mhm.
sense that when I stepped onto a farm or was working with clients, I
Mhm.
think they could sense that I was confident and
Mhm.
willing to listen,
Mhm.
but also was bringing, because I had to do things a little differently because
Mhm.
I was smaller, or, like I would approach things in a different manner.
Mhm.
And so I think, again, those early influences and experiences just allowed me to try different things and then find environments that allowed me
Mhm.
to apply in different ways.
Mhm.
And it worked. Like I think I always had really good respect and good relationship with
Mhm.
clients.
Mhm.
And even in the small animal world, because I did do some small animal locum work too, um, at the end of the day, for me, it was really about learning to build rapport and that relationship, again,
Mhm.
one on one with
Mhm.
clients. And so I think just spending that time to listen, um,
Mhm.
and see what was needed in different situations really allowed me to build who I was as a practicing veterinarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like, there's a lot of, going back to that person focused identity that you have, that relationship building, and then also being very adaptable, being very flexible, within your jobs. And that's what allowed you to do that so well.
Yeah.
I think there's so many of us as veterinarians that feel like we are completely defined by our jobs. We go to a dinner party and, heaven forbid we tell somebody we're a veterinarian because then we get peppered with all of these questions
Yeah.
or, it just consumes our entire life. And I'm wondering if you've ever had that struggle of separating your personal self from your identity as a veterinarian and how you found balance in that.
Absolutely. So that that would be my answer to the first part. And honestly, I would say it wasn't until I made that switch from being a technical services veterinarian team lead
Mm-hmm.
to being a commercial team lead, sales team lead,
Mm-hmm.
that was a forced reckoning of
Mm-hmm.
who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because if someone asks me now, like, what do I do, or what's my profession,
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying I'm a veterinarian,
Mm-hmm.
I will say I am trained as a veterinarian.
Mm-hmm.
And just that language shift for me, I think, has helped a ton, because again,
Yes.
it just reflects my training. It doesn't embody who I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that moment of there was a lot of ego as well, being a subject matter expert in my field
Mm-hmm.
and being a veterinarian. There's a lot of there's pride,
Mm-hmm.
there's pomp and circumstance in being known.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember vividly one of my first in clinic small, because I not only did I switch into a commercial role, but I also switched to be part of the companion animal team, to the dog and cat
Wow.
team,
So
where I
totally
had
different.
been, with the cattle and equine large animal team.
Mm-hmm.
I remember for the first time sitting in one of the small animal clinics, and we had one of our technical services veterinarians with us on that call, presenting to the group of veterinarians in that clinic. And they were going over the abstract and the latest research on vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting there thinking, I have no idea what she's talking about, but marveling at the fact that that used to be me.
Yeah.
That used to be my role in that other team,
Yeah.
in that other space.
Mm-hmm.
And sitting there and being okay with it, and actually having them, I remember just being wowed by this veterinarian colleague,
Mm-hmm.
in this space now working with me, but I no longer held that role at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it honestly took me a year to decouple that being a veterinarian was not my identity. It was
Mm-hmm.
just part of my background training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it carries a very different weight when you say I'm trained as a veterinarian versus I am a veterinarian. It
Yeah.
gives it that, we in the mental health cognition world, we call that, I think it's like emotional dissonance or
Mm,
something like that, where when it comes to our emotions, if we can name I am feeling angry instead of
right.
I am angry, it
Yeah.
just carries different weight. This
Yeah.
kind of works that way as well. I liked what you said at the beginning too, when you identified that this is a part of me but this isn't the whole me.
Hmm.
And, I think that that's really important as well.
Yeah.
And I think that gets to the next question I wanted to ask you, which is, when you were working full time, whether in clinical practice or in industry, what parts of your life or interests have helped you to feel like you, not just Dr. Melodie Chan?
Hmm.
How have you made sure to carve out space for yourself so that you can build this identity? I find that in a lot of people I speak to, they're like, I don't know who I am outside of Dr. So and so, and I
Yeah.
don't really have any interests outside of vet medicine.
Yeah.
How did you shape that?
And I think it's so important that we cultivate hobbies outside of veterinary medicine,
Mhm.
and even cultivating relationships where we're not
Mhm.
just talking about veterinary medicine. I remember just going through vet school and having this discussion with our classmates and saying, I don't even know if I can talk about non-veterinary
Mhm.
medicine related things. How do I even hold a conversation? And
Mhm.
so again, being really intentional with those types of spaces.
Okay.
For me, definitely I know that physical movement
Mhm.
and being outside in nature is really important for me as a reset.
Mhm.
And then very specifically in nature, I've learned that I need trees.
Mhm.
So I can even be in a space where it's like all rocky, but there's no trees and I actually don't feel settled. So it's been funny for me just to identify what specifically brings me that
Yeah.
peace. Um, and I did find though that what was happening in my personal life was because of that physical activity, whether it was running or biking,
Mhm.
um, I was starting to apply that same intensity that I
Mhm.
approached my professional life with
Mhm.
in that downtime. And so, whether it
Mhm.
was prepping for races or events, or just trying to keep up with the feeling like you got to keep up with your group of friends,
Mhm.
I actually found I was not doing myself any favors. And not only was I burning out on my professional side, but I was burning myself out trying to do all the other things that are supposed to help.
Totally.
Because it's that moment in yoga class when they tell you, remember, it's not a competition, honor your body, but in your head you're like, no, I can do what so and so is doing on the mat next to me better, or I
Oh,
can go deeper.
yeah, yeah,
And leaving that ego at the door
yeah,
is tough.
yeah.
And so I hit rock bottom. I went into burnout because, and part
Mhm.
of that contribution was doing too much on that personal
Yeah.
side and not honoring the rest and
Mhm.
recovery that
Mhm.
I actually needed.
Mhm. Yeah, so it sounds like it's so important. And certainly the research shows this. The Merck Animal Health Wellbeing research shows that one of the highest indicators of better well-being and lower psychological distress is having interests outside of vet medicine, hobbies,
Mm,
friends, family, exercise, social activities. And as type A individuals that most of us are, there's this concern that you can take this to the next level and that it's just going to take over. And so making sure that in addition to hobbies and activities, we also have time for rest and, rejuvenation.
mhm.
Yeah, that's so funny. Um, I'm wondering if you've ever experienced a conflict between your personal values, you've shared some of them, and the realities of clinical practice or industry. How did you handle that, and what did it teach you about your identity?
That's a very complex question.
Mhm.
um, I think for me, it's yes, that's happened. And I know that's happened because I have spent time reflecting on what my core values
Mhm.
are.
Mhm.
And from Brene Brown's, I think, Dare to Lead, where she makes you boil it down to just two. What are your
Yes.
two core values?
One of my favorite
My
exercises.
I love that. It's such a good one. If people haven't done it, go look it up.
I'll
It's
link to
so
it in the
good to
show
do.
notes for
Yeah.
everybody for sure.
So my two are learning and authenticity.
Mm.
And so when I reflect back on situations that have been in conflict with that.
Mm-hmm.
I do realize that's sort of what triggers me to almost armor up and just be mama bear and try to figure out, well, how do we fix this?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think in reflecting back and how I try to approach things moving forward is taking that moment when you feel like conflict is arising,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out, is it is it truly because my values are being questioned or being compromised,
Mm-hmm.
or actually it doesn't have anything to do with them and I just want to take this mantle up and do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so approaching things more now in a, is it net neutral, net positive, or net negative,
Mm-hmm.
to try and conserve my own energy,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that, there may be some things that you might not agree with how they're being handled, or the direction it is, but if it's really net neutral for you and your values, it's okay. You can, you don't need to take up the charge.
Mm-hmm.
And but if you truly feel like your values are being compromised or being placed into question,
Mm-hmm.
it does then make you pause and reflect and think about, okay, what what do I need to do to change that situation?
Mm-hmm.
Are there things you can do within that situation if you're truly being negatively impacted?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's so dire, do you need to just remove yourself from that situation
Mm-hmm.
completely?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, it's so interesting, and it's the more I think about this, and I'm almost thinking through it as you talk about it, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this topic. It almost seems like a situation where a person feels a values incongruence or conflict can almost lead to an identity crisis, so to speak.
mm-hmm,
I'll use the example of if an individual, um, you know, let's say that one of their core values is connection, right? And for people who haven't done this exercise, a core value is something of the utmost importance to you at the core of who you are, regardless of these various identities, that you hold, or
mm-hmm,
these roles that you have, whether it's mom, daughter, friend, veterinarian, teacher, mentor, etc. And so, if an individual really values connection and relationships and they're working as a veterinarian in a high volume practice, and they just have this sense of like this just doesn't feel right to me, like I'm burning
mm-hmm,
out, I don't feel satisfaction in my job, and there's clear values misalignment there between what the practice demands and what's important to this individual. It might lead them to question, am I a bad veterinarian? Or is veterinary medicine not for me? So it can almost lead to this questioning of a person's identity
yeah,
when really it maybe comes down to values misalignment. And that,
yeah,
like you said, if we can look at this as being a veterinarian is just one ticket to so many different opportunities out there, I need to really look for something that will be in alignment with what I've identified as being so important to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think that veterinary schools could do differently to help students develop a strong, flexible identity in their professional life that supports their well-being? Because you've done that, and that took maybe a bit of time for you, especially as you went through these, question periods as you moved from clinical practice into industry and then even shifted roles within industry. What would you like to see happen early out with our new grads?
So if I can approach that question with, um, you know, resources and money are there's no limits. I would love if every student could have a personal coach,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
because it's interesting. I think about how coaching is so much a part of just going through vet school, of just
Mm-hmm.
learning the skills as a veterinarian,
Mm-hmm.
but then we don't have a professional or a life coach, and that's
Mm-hmm.
separate, right? Like that's talking
Totally.
about and having that space where
Mm-hmm.
you can work through these questions of what does this ticket provide for me
Mm-hmm.
to do?
Mm-hmm.
What rooms does this doorway open up for me?
Mm-hmm.
And do I like any of them?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think back to the handful of people that I know that have started veterinary school and then realized it wasn't for them and left partway through. And I actually think that is great.
Mm-hmm.
I think, just strength to really understand who you are.
Yeah, that self-knowledge.
Yeah. And go, whoa, okay, I thought this was going to be one thing, but it's not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then again, as we go through, and like I said, I see so many students getting the DVM, or, that degree as the be all and end all, and not having that preparation for life beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just your first 5 years of your career. I think of even after 10 years or 15 years, if you've never had coaching,
Mm-hmm.
personal development coaching,
Yeah.
professional coaching,
Mm-hmm.
having someone to talk to who has no stake in your life, where
Mm-hmm.
you can just talk about what where your head's at. Because I
Totally.
think for me, I've had the opportunity to work with professional coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and wow, what a tremendous
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. And the one in particular I'm thinking of in just pivotal moments, just asking me, what is it that you want?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember never having had anyone in my life actually ask me that. I had been working so much in the space in my head of what I think other people expect
Mm-hmm.
of me.
Mm-hmm.
And to actually have that moment, to have somebody just ask with no strings attached, what
Mm-hmm.
do you really want?
Mm-hmm.
Gave me that moment of to pause and reflect.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting, and I'm sure everyone's experiences with this are different. And I can't say that I spent a lot of time in the guidance counselor's office, when I was in school, but I think about in high schools where they have a guidance counselor whose role is really to help students come to decisions about their post-secondary education or training or plans or whatever it might be. And I'm sure a lot of those questions get asked, like, what do you love? What are you passionate about? What do you see yourself doing 5 years from now? And all of these things. And yet, we don't go through that very important process in vet medicine. I didn't identify my core values until I was, gosh, 10 to 15 years out of vet school. And now, when I look back at that, I'm like, that is unfathomable. How was I making decisions? How was I making plans? How was I recognizing when I felt stuck or uncomfortable or burnt out or dissatisfied? How was I recognizing where that was coming from? And I think
Mm-hmm.
the short answer is I wasn't. And so that led to, resigning from some jobs I really enjoyed. And, everything happens for a reason and it took me where I am today. But
Yeah.
I love that suggestion. I think that's a powerful thing to consider. And I do know that there are many vet schools right now that are revising their curriculums to incorporate awareness and training around developing a healthy professional identity. So hopefully we'll be able to see that,
Mm-hmm.
come to fruition and make a difference for our new generation of veterinarians.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to finish off with just a couple of questions. The first one is, what does the phrase reviving veterinary medicine mean to you?
I think for me, reviving veterinary medicine means being able to move forward in a forward motion with energy and intention.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we do spend, sometimes we can get stuck in that, looking at how things were done.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it's important to honor the past, but look around and understand what's changed, how how the environment's changed, how the clientele has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And again, trying to apply some of those learnings of, so where do we go from here so we can be sustainable in
Mm-hmm.
this. And when I think of reviving veterinary medicine in the context of what your business is doing and what that whole idea of what you are doing with your program, it really is what I just talked about, what we can offer for vet students. It's giving tools and people and coaches to veterinarians and their teams
Mm-hmm.
so that they can move forward with energy and intention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Finally, I know that you've got some exciting projects on the go and things that you're involved with, also in the name of bettering our profession, bettering the lives of veterinarians everywhere. If people want to get in touch with you or learn more about you and what you do, where's the best place for them to reach out?
Yeah, so right now I'm involved with the Lost Vet project. And so people can look that up online, either in LinkedIn, as well as there's a website. And then I also host a podcast that's on Spotify. And so if you look up The Lost Vet, there will be episodes there where I interview people, again, talking about coaching, mentoring, training,
Mm-hmm.
all of the day-to-day things. Again, you've heard my passion is people.
Yeah.
And so it's really to help support the people that are in the veterinary industry and how to move through this really tough thing that we call life.
I love that. Well, it's been such a joy to have a conversation with you about this. Melody, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks again for having me.